Good evening. This is episode 25. I called this episode Drowning, and I know that a lot of the episodes that I discuss typically deal with depression and kind of finding who you are. And I think I focus a lot on that primarily because that's what I had gone through. They say you stem from personal experiences, so that's what I've kind of done. But when we look at the big scheme of things, emotions play a role in everything that we experience. And I call this drowning because of things that are overwhelming. You know, when we go through what we go through on a daily, hourly, weekly basis, as far as being picked on or being depressed or not comfortable in our own skin, or dealing with family and friends and things like that, it can really feel like we're just drowning. And how do we get out of that? A lot in that regard, I've kind of talked about it from an internal purpose and a procedure and finding a way out of it. But as I go through this and as I started this, I wanted to try to cover, a wide gambit of things that we go through and things that we experience throughout life. And loneliness is something that I've briefly talked on, and there's an underlying part of loneliness in the majority of the episodes that I talk about, but I don't know that I've really spent a lot of time on what it means to be lonely and how that affects you. Now, when I say lonely, I mean, those of you who feel like you don't fit in anywhere and you just don't feel like you belong. Maybe you don't have a lot of friends, or maybe you're not comfortable around people, and part of that is trying to understand where that stems from. And then, loneliness for those of you who don't want to be lonely, and you try to put yourself out there, and you just never meet the right people, and things like that can lead to depression or lead to feeling of less worth than you are. And that can make you feel like you're drowning, right? Because as you, again, wake up every day and put your feet on the floor and think about what your day is going to be, or dread what your day is going to be, it's hard to try to think about, the positive things that are going to come out of your day, and if anything, it's going to be positive. And again, the weight of the world feels like it's on our shoulders. And then if you are someone who really has a desire because you have, you've got experiences you want to share, you've got opinions, you want to find other people that are like you, and yet you still feel lonely and you still don't feel like there's a place to fit in. A lot of what I've talked about, and what I typically stress, is that we don't know where your life is going to go. We don't know where every day and every minute is going to take you. My big thing is hanging in there to be able to experience those things and those unknowns that we don't know. And if it's lonely, that can come in many different factors, and that can be very compounded on your daily life. Because if we try to think about, all right, you put your feet on the floor, you try to think about how your day is going to be, and then, come lunchtime, you might be sitting by yourself, and then after work or school or whatever the event might be, you're still by yourself. And yes, I talk about spending time by yourself and getting to know you as you are. And for those of you who are out there who feel lonely and feel like outcasts, you might already spend a lot of time in your head as it is. And part of what I talk about is trying to find the positive things about you and the things around you that can hopefully make you realize that your loneliness is not as lonely as you think it is. And there are things that we can view and see and recognize and experience that happen on a daily basis and a minute basis that maybe you didn't recognize before. But then there are those who, are lonely and sad because of, whether it be an outcast or whether it be from losing a loved one or a very close friend, or maybe you just moved to a new place and you just, you don't really know how to start. There's a lot of things that can go into obviously being lonely because there's so many different aspects to it. And I wish that I had, well, maybe I'll spend a couple different episodes on discussing maybe things that you can do to try to feel less lonely based on certain experiences. In this episode, I'd like to focus a little bit more on what it feels like to be lonely and how to come out of it from inside. We're not talking about necessarily an external factor. I'll try to spend some episodes on those. But I think it's important to recognize how you feel and what you experience while you're lonely, and really how to understand that it can be a blessing versus a hindrance, and it's also something that can hopefully make you feel like you've got more going on in your life than you do. And maybe I'll try to touch on some of the others, but my biggest proponent is you trying to understand who you are and being able to be happy with who you are. And that plays a role in so many different aspects of your life. And as you go throughout life and as you experience everything that life has to offer, because there are going to be so many different experiences that you don't even know are going to happen. And the big thing is being comfortable with who you are and confident with who you are, because any situation you're put in, you at least know how you're going to feel and how you're going to deal with it, and maybe even how you can experience it. Because if you're not familiar with yourself and you end up in a situation you're not comfortable with, that can become, first off, it obviously can become depressing. But, the more that you think about it, the more you might feel down, and the more that you maybe find yourself in these situations, or even, let's say that you had gone to an event where there were a bunch of people and it wasn't a good experience. And then the next time you have an opportunity to go to an event, you're either angry that you have to go and you just automatically off the bat think that it's going to be terrible. So you go in with a bad attitude, or B, you stop experiencing things. And so that's just one aspect of the many reasons why I think that it's important to be comfortable with yourself. So when we talk about it from, let's say, being lonely, it's sad and it's a hard thing to deal with if it's something that you're not used to. I mean, for me, it was different. I've had so many different aspects of my life that were lonely. The first one that I really experienced, though, was when we moved. When I was 12 or 13 when we moved states. And where I came from, I knew everybody only because that's where I was born. I knew everybody in the neighborhood. We were all about the same age. We would hang out with the same people. Again, we're 12, so how much hanging out can you do? But still, I knew everybody. And when I was at school, there were people I know. So it was all about being familiar. And then when we moved, 7 states away to a place where we had no family, no friends, no connection whatsoever. I was just dropped into the middle of nowhere. And, trying to come into a new place where, using school as an example, or in this scenario, it was hard. I'd always gone to small schools, and now I was experiencing very large schools. And of course, even though this was 6th grade, I think at the time, 6th or 7th grade, it was shocking. And not only that, I didn't know anybody. And so it was very lonely, and it was weird, because I came from an environment where I was comfortable. I could be myself. The clothes that I wore were fine. Nobody ever said anything about it. My hair was fine. There was nothing that I'd ever really experienced that was that negative. And at this new place and at this new school, it was all about the clothes you wore, or the haircut you had, or the color of your hair, or your shoes. And it was odd. So not only did I not fit in, I also didn't feel like I could be myself. And so it was very lonely. And I was able to experience this for the first time. And I didn't know what to do with it. I mean, it was a feeling, as you become a teenager, 12, 13, your body and your mind and everything is changing. And so having that, and then being in an environment that I had nothing, and no one, it was just so odd. And even when I, in the beginning, started, or in the beginning when I was myself, I would get, picked on. And I just thought, this is the strangest thing. And so I didn't really have a choice. I didn't have any friends. I didn't have anybody, and it was very lonely. So for the first, let's see, through 7th, 8th, and part of 9th grade, it was very lonely. And even the people that I would get to meet and what I thought were my friends weren't really. It was odd. So my point is that when I think about loneliness, for me, it originates from, trying to be who I am and trying to understand who I am, especially in a new environment, and just having everything thrown back in my face. How do we deal with that? Well, from a loneliness perspective, I wasn't aware of, I don't know what the term would be, but I wasn't aware of internal thinking, so to speak. Everything, especially as we're growing and getting older, and as we're developing, as a kid, everything that we do is pretty much at face value. Meaning, when we think about things and appreciate things, they're physical objects, and we never really, we never really think about who we are inside, because we're just trying to experience life. When we think about, as kids, right, we're always thinking about presents and Christmas and birthdays and, whatever holiday it is that you experience. Everything kind of has a face value. And so we don't think about, well, how do I make myself inside feel good when we're so happy at life, or at least trying to absorb everything that's coming at us in life. What happens, like my situation, when, I had experienced everything at face value, and then all of a sudden, everything at face value is negative. And so I became, very lonely and sad and depressed. And then all I really thought about was, well, what do I need to do to make these people like me? I ended up dyeing my hair. I ended up begging my parents to get me special shoes and clothes, and I looked ridiculous. I mean, if I go back and look at pictures, it's just like, I don't even know what I was thinking. But again, I never looked inside. I wasn't familiar with who I was. And all I really wanted to do was not be lonely, especially considering how much of a 180 it was from where I came from. And so I use this in this particular situation. I use this example when I think about loneliness, because that was, one of the, not the first time I felt loneliness, but that was the longest and really first profound experience that I had, especially as long as it was, for years. It was so odd. So, I started to, again, think about all of these things that I needed to do and like and become so that other people could like me, or I could be part of a conversation, or I didn't feel like an outcast. But when I look back at that, again, like I've talked about in so many cases, changing who you are for other people isn't good. I mean, it might feel good at the moment. It's kind of like, the only reason you got a job was so that you could save up enough money to buy the next iPhone or whatever gadget it is. And then you get it, and then what? You've wasted, 5, 6, 7 months of work and time and money saving up to buy something that in 3 months is going to be obsolete. It's life, unfortunately, is cyclical, but it depends on the aspect that we're referring to. Loneliness can certainly be that, but again, it also depends on what's going on and how that applies to your life. So when you find yourself in a lonely place, for me, I'm a nostalgic person. I typically think about previous parts of my life that made me happy, and where I was happy, and what I could do to make me happy, and how that was, different from where I was in that moment, again, back in middle school. And so I spent so much time trying to become something for other people, and I lost me. And so what does that leave you with? Well, if you're lonely in the aspect of not having friends, and you're changing who you are so that you have friends, what's going to eventually happen is, maybe, this could go a couple different ways. Let's say 2 to be simplistic. One is you've changed, you love who you are, you love your new friends, and your life goes on like that forever. Or B, you realize these aren't the friends that you wanted, and all the time that you've spent to become something you're not, you lose who you are. So then now you find yourself being lonely, having changed yourself to become something that you think you wanted to be. And then now you're twice as lonely because you've lost who you are. You don't have those people or friends that you strived to have. And that can leave you very lonely, and that can leave you very hopeless, because you think, well, I've done all these things, I tried so hard, and in the end it didn't do me any good. What's the point in living? Or what's the point in having friends? Or moving on, or being positive, or listening to a stupid podcast that a guy talks about trying to make yourself feel good. It's all about trying to understand. People interest me, because to me there are certain things, and you've probably experienced this in your life as well, but there are certain things in life that people do that astonish me. And as I've gotten older and seen and met so many different people and cultures, it's interesting to see how people still are and how they haven't changed. And if anything, things have only made it more difficult and worse for people to be who they are. And so, I hope that if you're lonely, that you take the time to realize that who you are is impressive, and who you are is special. And what you should focus on is finding like-minded people. Now, that probably sounds like something that maybe your parents say or a therapist says, but ironically it's true, because changing who you are, now finding yourself is one thing. If, let's say, you don't really know if you do or don't like sports, and so you want to, hang out with the sports team or chess team or whatever it might be. If you don't know, it's always good to certainly experience things and determine if these are things that you like or don't like. But then trying to find out if truly those are things that you do and don't like can be a great experience. Because then you can check off your list, I don't like this. Or you can, realize that you really like something, and then you start to build on that. And then you build confidence, and then, it just kind of snowballs to different aspects of your life, both emotionally and physically within your realm. And so the part of being lonely is, yes, it's sad, because you might think, well, every night or every weekend I'm at home. I'd rather be out doing something that other kids do. That, that can be a hard thing to go through, because that's a lot of what I went through. Moving to a new city, and then not having any friends where, I used to have weekend rituals, so to speak, of things that we did with my friends and everything, to all of a sudden be stuck in an apartment where I didn't know anybody or, go and do anything. And so I wish I had spent more time focusing on myself. And now let's say that you are tired of listening to me say focus on yourself. You're thinking, how do I fix this? So in this example, if you are someone who's lonely and you're familiar with who you are familiar with the things that you like, and you just want to find a person or other people to experience it with, the answer to that can be tricky. Primarily because everybody's different. I mean, each city's culture is different. Based upon the city's culture, depends on how people communicate with one another, and this, that, and the other. So it can really vary. Maybe you live in a city where simply walking outside or going to a bookstore, oddly enough, years ago, I don't remember what the statistic is, but I read that a very large percentage of people who meet, whether it be friends or relationships, meet in bookstores. I would imagine that's still similar. A lot of people don't necessarily read books. However, it's interesting that every time I go into a bookstore, there's more people than I would think that there would be. But my point is, I can't give you a single answer because so many different places are different. But there are places. I think the key thing is finding it. There might be, if you can go to Starbucks or a coffee shop. It doesn't have to be Starbucks, but a coffee shop. But people where people typically leisurely hang out, or going to the mall is not really a big thing anymore. But there's probably something in your area. Now you might be thinking, the majority of the people that I necessarily don't want to be friends with, and the people I get picked on at school, they hang out at those same places. So then what do I do? Well, it's, you can be different outside of work or school, and that's okay. Now what I mean by that is not changing who you are, right? But you might be somebody at school who is always focused on schoolwork and homework, and you don't do anything else. And people might think that you are as a book nerd and you don't have anything interesting. However, you might like music or comic books or books in general, or movies and TV shows, or whatever it is. It's okay to let other people know if these are groups and places you want to go to, to know who you are. And then if you're a person who doesn't have a particular trait, then that kind of falls back on finding out who you are and things that you like. Like I've said before, for me, it comes to movies, music, and TV shows. And I'm trying to not become my own therapist. What I was going to say, though, is there are a couple of reasons why I think that I rely on those. And I've briefly mentioned these in the past because I've been picked on so much. I, in return, kind of developed a sad ability to, start finding things wrong with other people. It's just a defensive mechanism. And then I figured out that there are always popular or well-known TV shows and movies. And if I had my own opinion about any of them, then I could be different than other people. Not different in an odd way, which is still okay, but more different in having a different opinion than what all their other friends have. Possibly to sound enlightened or educated or, whatever it might be. To bring this point around, if you are someone who's lonely and you don't really know who you are and, what type of conversations or how you might, be yourself outside of school or be somebody different than who you might be portrayed in school, is finding things that you like and being educated about those things so that you do have the ability to have conversations with other people. For me, defensively, to start out with, it came to, again, having opinions about things that people may or may not know about. So I could either be very smart about a subject that people aren't aware of, or I could at least have an opinion about a topic or subject that people are aware of. So it kind of allowed me to feel confident in myself by knowing and having educated myself about certain things or having opinions about certain things. And it gave me confidence. And so, I as I've mentioned, I still find it odd in some circumstances to be in a room filled with people who don't necessarily, watch movies or listen to the same type of music or, same TV shows and things like that. And that's okay, because you're not going to be the person who knows something about everything. Now, don't get me wrong, there are people who are like that, but those are typically people who are more boisterous. And typically, this isn't a guarantee, but typically people who feel lonely or depressed or suicidal or just have a tough time with daily life aren't necessarily boisterous, because we're so impacted at the things that are coming at us. And so it's okay to not know everything. I was an instructor for many, many, many years. And again, coming and growing up how I grew up and, going through the loneliness and depression and suicidal thoughts that I had, at first I never thought I'd be in front of a classroom teaching, but because of how I grew, it brought me to that. And so, we don't know who you are today is going to bring you tomorrow, but starting somewhere helps prepare you for the things that are going to come in the future. So finding different ways to deal with loneliness, can contain many different factors. And like I said, maybe over the next couple episodes, I'll try to tackle some of these different aspects. But at least in this episode, I'm trying, or ended up primarily focusing on, people who are lonely, who don't necessarily want to be lonely. And again, to try to prevent becoming more depressed or becoming more sadder or feeling more lonely, it's important that we're able to have a strong arsenal of information from within ourselves so that we are able to communicate and present that to other people. And so finding friends, it's all about finding people who are like-minded, regardless of what it is. It's never okay to be ashamed of what you like. And I know that in some cases might be hard to stomach or understand, primarily because of, maybe these external sources that have been telling you that what you're doing and what you like is wrong. That doesn't matter. If it makes you feel good, then that's perfectly fine. If you're not harming or hurting anybody else, then, what does it matter? Because you're not the only person who likes that thing. And it makes it even more special when you find people who do. So, if we try to change who we are so that we can fit in with other people, so that other people like us, there's nothing special about that. I mean, don't get me wrong, that takes energy and strength to do that. But that doesn't do anything for you eternally and emotionally to be able to grow. Because going back, if we stayed true to who we were and the things that we liked, finding other people who like those things, same things, makes it feel that even more special. And it could have been someone or an experience that you may have missed out on. So I feel like I've kind of been all over the place, but I'm trying to focus or drive home, I guess, and reiterate again how important it is to find you. And so when we're lonely, and it's hard, it's hard for me today to see people because of where I live and where I work. I see people of all ages that seem like they're lonely. And, my heart goes out to those because of that. And, I wish that there was a single answer that I could give you. And there's not. But I hope that you can learn to look inward to be able to step outward and to find and do these things you do, because you won't be lonely. And even if you are lonely and you think that there's no light at the end of the tunnel, there is. I can tell you there is. Now I can, however, tell you, so that was a double can, but I can tell you that if you think sitting at home and not doing anything is going to bring you good things, that doesn't always happen. But if you are sitting at home, learning about yourself and experiencing the things around you, and then stepping out, you have the chance of meeting other people that you never thought you would. You could be, if we use a bookstore or library as an example, you might end up, running into someone who likes the same book or the same genre that you do. And then, that becomes a conversation of they recommending books that you didn't know about, or, maybe they read a book that you were interested in reading and you're getting feedback. And anyway, the point is that, things in our life that can seem very minuscule are actually planting very big seeds for the rest of the experience that you can live in. And so, regardless of how small it is or big it is, so to even give you a different example, something daily or almost daily that people do is go to the store, whether it be a gas station or whether it be a grocery store, or whether it be, the mall, whatever it is. I was at the store a couple of weeks ago, and I was contemplating buying something, and this woman had, just seen me standing over there near it, and I think I'd gone back and forth to it several different times. In any case, she just came up and expressed what her thoughts were on it. And, it's, again, you wouldn't think sitting in your house one moment and feeling like there's no one out there for you, that going even to the grocery store would give you an interaction. But it does. So, I'm not talking about going out and trying to find these interactions. I mean, that's, if you're confident in doing that and comfortable, that's perfectly fine. But if not, that's okay too. Just being able to go out and experience the world around you is going to lead you to experiences that you, again, don't know that you're going to have. And I feel like I say that a lot, but for me, it's just about constantly driving that home, because, if you are lonely and you are depressed and you contemplate taking your own life, if you don't know what is out there, you can't, and I can't tell you what's going to be out there, but my point is that what you can experience throughout your life is at least something that you can experience. But if you decide taking your own life is an answer, I can 100% tell you that you're going to miss out on those experiences. And if you're lonely and depressed and in a deep, dark place, it's going to make it more difficult to be able to go out or even to look up. And I know I've said that on several different occasions, but here's the reason why. One of the reasons that I talk about even looking up. I have a very good friend of mine. And when I first met him, he never, ever would look you in the eye. And, first off, it takes, I don't want to say confidence, but it takes a lot to be able to look someone in the eye, whether you're the one talking or you're the one listening. So the fact that this person would never look you in the eye, whether they were talking or whether you were talking, was just odd. And, it comes down to confidence. And I think I wouldn't want you or anyone else to not feel confident to be able to look at someone in the eye, whether it be for a second, or even just briefly during a conversation. And so being confident with yourself and knowing who you are, I'm not talking about loving who you are. I'm just talking about being comfortable with who you are, because, it takes a lot to love yourself, from every single aspect. Even I don't do that, but I'm comfortable with who I am. And so even just a little bit of confidence can again bring you to environments or situations that you wouldn't recognize. And so, yes, loneliness is rough and hard, and the more we think about it and the more we experience it, we think it's never going to get better. I'm never going to get out. It's always going to be like this. And then you can become cynical towards people. And again, that's not what we want. That's not what I want for you. My goal is for you to wake up every day and be elated on what you will experience. And of course, everything takes small steps to get there. But I'm hoping that that's what I'm hopefully doing for you. It can seem down and lonely, but the next thing you know, you have met someone, you become friends, they have friends that you meet up with, and the next thing you know, you're trying to think of excuses not to go hang out with your friends because you just want to sit at home and relax. It's odd how life works. I think anyway, there's everything in life interests me because everything is volatile. And so, just having made that example made me think about another example that I'll tell you in just a second. But think about that. You can go from being someone who really wants to have friends to becoming someone who realizes that maybe they don't have enough time for themselves anymore. Not that that's a bad thing. but it's all relative. And then think about this. There are when the Wii first came out, the game console Wii, I had friends of mine. Well, I say friends. There was one friend of mine who paid, I don't know, $700 and some odd to be one of the first people to get the Wii. Right? Now think about that. If I don't play games, but I'm just using this as an example. But if you think about it, having done that, and he went through a lot just to be able to get that console. And then you look at it now, I think they sell for like $50. Now, yes, I know that this was, I don't know, 10 or more years ago that this came out. And yes, not everything retains their value. But my point is I hope that by listening to me, that you on a daily basis can learn to at least appreciate everything, regardless of what your situation is, whether you're lonely, whether you're depressed, whether you feel like, life's not worth living. If you're able to recognize something every day, or at least every other day, that is unique or something you appreciate in life, it's all about, these daily surprises, so to speak. And so, when we think about striving to become the first person to get the new coolest thing, in the end, it's not that great. And it's because it's primarily a tangible object. And I want you to find the core in you and what's around you, and to appreciate that same thing today as you will in 10 years. And it not just be something that fades over time. I want you to be able to appreciate you on a daily basis and appreciate what you can experience in life and the world around you on a daily basis. And so loneliness can be lonely, but it also allows us to see the things around us. And then the more we recognize, the more we can share with other people when we get to that situation. So I appreciate you listening. This was another long one. I hope it was helpful. Again, if you've got anything you want me to talk about or discuss or a topic, I keep anything anonymous, so you can always email me at lifeliveseries@gmail.com. I try to always be live on Spreaker on Tuesdays and Fridays at 9:30. And I hope that you appreciate yourself, and I hope you continue to even doing the breathing exercises of breathing all the way out, breathing in for 5 seconds, holding it for 5 seconds, and breathing out for 5 seconds, and using those 15 seconds to at least focus and appreciate. You don't have to appreciate, but just focus on one thing for 15 seconds that you've never recognized before. And it could very well be the very tip of a pen or a pencil. Just something. So thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you on Tuesday.